Hello, leaders of the world. Welcome to Spread Love in Organizations, a podcast for purpose-driven healthcare leaders striving to make life better around the world by leading their teams with genuine care, servant leadership, and love. I'm Naji, your host for this very special episode, like no other, with Brie Doyle, founder of She Glows Retreats and author of the great book, You Should Leave Now, Going on Retreat to Find Your Way Back to Yourself. We will be hearing from Brie about how to take care about ourselves as leaders, a key subject, yet rarely seriously considered by many of us. Brie hosts transformational wellness retreats throughout the US and across the globe, and is the founder of She Glows Retreats. She specializes in curating mental and emotional wellness curriculum for groups, conscious companies, schools, and individuals. A yoga and meditation teacher for over 20 years, Brie is a leader in the health and wellness space who helps people heal their past and reclaim their power. Her first book comes out this July, Be on the Lookout. Brie lives in Boulder, Colorado with her husband and 3 kids, and I am so excited to have you with me today on this podcast.
Thanks so much, Naji. I'm so excited to be here.
Brie, before traveling with you on a retreat, if I might say it that way, I'd love to hear more about your personal story and your journey, founding your company and writing this very first book.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to share more. So I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, actually, and I live here now. So moved away for a bit, but I grew up. Both my parents were married. I have 2 younger brothers, and I grew up. I was a really shy, quiet kid. I was smaller and younger for my grade, so I was pretty quiet in class, and I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. That was something I really, I loved children at a young age, so that was something I pursued. And, from there, I taught in schools actually for quite a while before having my own kids. So it kind of started there. And then going further into my professional career. So I taught in New York City for a while. That was a wild experience. And then I taught in Boulder, Colorado for 10 years. And then once I had my kids, I decided to stay home with my kiddos because my husband has a big job and travels quite a lot. So that was when I started writing. So it kind of started there.
Awesome. And so from there, how did you, went into your belief around retreats and their well, I would say, for leaders, right? And how to thrive in your life.
So retreating became important for me for a lot of reasons. I studied abroad when I was in college. I lived in Nepal, actually, and I met a Buddhist meditation teacher, and I became really interested and studied under him and read constantly about Buddhism. And I started taking retreats that way. And I was, in my 20s at that time. And so I came home and I continued to take regular retreats just as a practice to kind of pull away from my daily life and meditate and relax and dig deeper into kind of my inside life. And but then I had kids and things changed a little bit. It became harder to leave, as I'm sure many of you know. So I had a few years where I hadn't taken a retreat for a while. And there was a point where I was really kind of struggling. I found myself, just depleted and exhausted, and I was feeling a little bit lost. And so I said to my husband, I was like, I think I need to take a retreat. I know we have 3 small kids. It's a hard time for me to leave, but I think I need to go on a retreat. And thankfully he was really understanding. And I went on a retreat. And what I realized is that, there was nothing wrong with me. I was just exhausted. I just needed more of myself, so stepping away was really important. And so going on that trip, and then I came home, I realized, gosh, I'm not the only one who feels like this. I know that other people, whether it's from parenting or work or whatever it is, are dealing with exhaustion and burnout and, feeling sad, heavy feelings like that. So that's where I started my business, was from that point, just realizing that other people, need some kind of container or motivation to step away themselves.
Yeah, this is so true. And for many leaders, we always say you have to take care of yourself to be able to take care of others, right? Like the self-love. And you even use this word in your book around self-love. But many of us would see it as a little bit selfish, if I may use the word, to go on a retreat or do this. And many times we say, yeah, we need to take care of about ourselves, but we don't have time. We always find excuses not to do it.
Yeah.
What would be your advice for many of us, who need it but won't do it?
Totally. I hear that all the time, is that, gosh, it feels so indulgent. And one of my beliefs is that, if we're really going to take care of other people, it has to start with ourselves, and it's a discipline. It seems like this really nice frivolous thing that people who have lots of money or lots of free time might do. But the thing is, if we're really leaders in our industry or in our homes or wherever we're leaders, we have to model this kind of behavior, because when you're modeling this for the people that work for you or the people that live with you, then they themselves feel permission to do the same sort of thing. So honestly, I see it as a sense of discipline, that a leader would take this kind of break, because it's not common and it's not encouraged. Our society is like, go, 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 more, push, push, push. And we're seeing staggering numbers of mental health issues. We think about health and we think it's all related to our physical bodies. We have all kinds of like foods we should be eating, exercises we should be doing. But the only thing we hear about mental health are like the really horrifying statistics. It's like 1 in 4 adults right now has a diagnosable mental health challenge, and that's really significant. I think this is in my book too, but I think it's, let's see, 10.3 million adults have suicidal thoughts. Suicide is the third leading cause of death among 15 to 19-year-olds. So this is really significant. It's not something that we can treat lightly anymore. Like dealing and making space for our mental health is really significant. If we're going to talk about health, we have to talk about the mental emotional components, not just like what's going on with our heart, what's going on with our lungs. It's a lot deeper than that. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't know. We never learned, right, in school how to deal with emotions, how to talk about them. Like how many times, with my team, especially during this past year that we had, right, with the pandemic, starting to talk about emotions, how important it is. It's true, technology connected us, but there's this miss of human warmth that is definitely bringing. I hope we won't get into a new pandemic with mental health, but it's definitely a big issue that we will be facing. So yeah, it's great what you're doing and spreading this important notion about taking care of ourselves.
Thank you.
Brie, how would you define? We talked about retreat. I'd love to hear, what do you mean by retreat?
Yeah, of course. So for me, a retreat is really just taking time, a set period of time, and pulling away from your day-to-day life, pulling out of your daily duties, all the shoulds and the have-tos, and unplugging. I suggest on my retreats that all my participants, they shut off their phones, they send one final email to family and work saying, hey, I'll be back in touch after the weekend or after the week or whatever duration you've decided, and really kind of shutting out that world to focus on your inner world, and really just to kind of realign yourself. It starts with very basic things. So like getting proper sleep. These are things we totally take for granted. And in our day-to-day life, we don't value things like sleep or eating nourishing food or being out in nature, these things that are very basic and fundamental to our species, but this is not, again, these are not values that are honored in our society. So it's coming back to those really basic principles that seem like, oh, of course I do that. But over a lifetime, we start to slip away from some of those habits. So it's bathing ourselves in those habits again. And that's how retreating starts, is really kind of allowing yourself to sleep, allowing yourself really basic things. But it goes much deeper than that. I believe on retreat that it's different than like a vacation. It's different than like a weekend away with friends, that you go away for like a higher spiritual intent. So I always suggest that people bring either a podcast or a book or something that's going to challenge you or help you grow in a certain way, particularly if you're going on your own. You can either join an organized retreat or you can retreat by yourself. So my book kind of breaks down how to choose what is best for you, whether you should just go by yourself or to join a group. There's so many ways to retreat right now. It's wonderful, but it's worth considering, what is best for you at a certain time. So it's really just pulling away, shutting out your day-to-day duties, and just allowing time for yourself.
And would this be something that you would do like once a year, once a semester? Is there any advice around, timing of those?
Yes, my husband and I have this pact where we each go once a year. That, right, we're kind of in the throes of life. We're both have big careers, we have kids, and so that feels reasonable. I mean, of course, I'd love to go more, but that feels like a reasonable duration. If I can go more, great. But typically once a year, and that's a pact I keep with myself because one of the things that happens is once you say, okay, I'm going to go on a retreat, then you easily start to talk yourself out of it. Like, oh, I don't really actually have time for that, or oh, this is a bad weekend for me. So I suggest like committing to some duration or some every year, something like that, that feels reasonable, and sticking with that because you will try to kind of weasel your way out of it.
And in between, like this once yearly, which definitely agree with you, like shutting down, disconnecting is
Mhm.
so important, right? At least we need it at least once a year, right?
Absolutely.
Any advice on in between those times, right? Because our brain, I'm also a big believer of not only intensity, right, but more being consistent with what we do.
Yes.
And our brain is always turned on with the many different hats that we have. Any
Yes.
advices or anything that you do personally between those retreats to keep on re-energizing yourself, stepping back, being mindful? Any tips for us as leaders?
Sure. I mean, I really think committing to some sort of daily practice. I mean, we hear this all the time, but I appreciate that you said, consistency really matters because I agree with you. I mean, I think it's our habits that really determine who we become. So for me, my personal practice, I'm a morning person. I think you have to kind of consider, am I a morning person or a night person? But for me, I'm a morning person. So I like to get up in the morning and I, do yoga, do some meditation before the kids get up. And, there's so many different apps out there. There's so many different supports to do meditation or yoga just from your living room. And those are the things I do. And then also breath work. So I do those three every single morning. And, occasionally here and there I'll miss, like if we're traveling or if I wake up, I don't sleep well and I wake up late, then I'll just do like just meditation or something like that. But I try to have a really firm, practice for my internal, wellspring, because I feel like you said, it's a stacking effect. It's not something you do once, just like a retreat. I mean, it's not something you do one time and say, okay, I'm good. It's a regular practice. So again, finding the time of day that works for you and committing to that. And again, if you commit really firmly to 2 weeks of that, then you'll have a new pattern, so finding that time of day. And honestly, I mean, 10 minutes makes a world of difference. It doesn't have to be hours. It can be 10 minutes. And frankly, if you don't have 10 minutes in your day, then, I think it's time to reprioritize.
Yeah,
So
take a minute to plan for it, right?
exactly. Yeah.
Brie, from your book, "You Should Leave Now," that is going to be published very soon, July 13th, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. You share 9 elements of a retreat.
Yeah.
What would be the top two that you can share right now?
Yeah, the top two. So, we spoke about one briefly, which is disconnecting from work and home life. So again, that's just being really clear. And I again suggest sending an email or some kind of communication. So there's a hard line when you leave, like, I love you all so much. Unless there's an emergency, we don't need to be in touch, because it's hard. When you get on retreat, you start to feel bored or you start to miss your people. Or you start to think, gosh, I really should be working on that. And that pulls you completely out of your space. So really being firm about disconnecting from work and home life. And then another practice, that this is a hard one for people, but I believe really firmly in this practice, is using silence as a tool when you're on retreat. So when you've pulled away, this is easy to do when you're by yourself, right? Because you're not interacting with lots of people. But if you join an organized program, it's harder to find moments of silence. And the reason that I feel this way is we spend so much of our lives just inundated with conversations and opinions and constantly bumping up against people, whether it's via Zoom or seeing people drop off our kids' playground, at the school, or friends or family, whatever it is, we're constantly chatting. And sometimes we lose that sense of like that felt sense, that inner voice that we know is there. And so when you take out that element of speaking all the time, then, different different things start to bubble up for you, different ideas, different creative insights, different synchronicities. All of these things start to come forward. So using silence as a tool on your retreat, like for me, when I go by myself, but usually I'll stay at a retreat center, I'll have the morning be total silence. So even though people are having breakfast and some people are having conversations, I just sit by myself and stay silent.
I
So
love this. I miss silence. So I will definitely try it.
yeah. So when you have kids at home, it's like you really value it even more. Yeah.
What is, if I may ask, like, what is your best learning or, the best experience you had during a personal retreat?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great question. I, so one of the was my idea for this book actually came as a result of a retreat and all the chapters. It was like I had 2 days of silence. The first day is kind of hard. You're kind of battling through like your old patterns of home and you're feeling like bored and like you should be doing more. But by the second day, you kind of start to drop down a little bit and settle down, calm down. So after that second day, it was the third day came and it was, I was meditating and then I had gone for a hike. And on that hike, I had the idea for this book that's now being published. And it was like it all came to me in a matter of an hour, and I couldn't get my pen to move fast enough. I mean, I was just jotting down millions of ideas. And it's funny because that journal is the journal that I used to kind of reflect back on when I was writing the actual book. So to me, that was really a big moment because I've always wanted to be a writer, and I've always been a writer. And I've worked with fiction. I've done all kinds of different things. So this really came true as a result of me pulling away for a retreat.
That is great.
Thanks.
Um, Brie, our podcast is called Spread Love in Organizations. I
Yeah.
have to ask you, what do you think about this? So what is your reaction when you hear Spread Love in Organizations?
I mean, I think it's an amazing way to use your gifts because I think, I know you personally have had so much experience with like in the medical world, but to spread love in organizations is such an important thing because if you want to be a leader, right, we have to model this work, and to share it among the business world, I think is so, so critical because we kind of tend to separate, like thinking spiritual or personal over here, business over here. But when you can bring those two things together, then you feel so fulfilled. I think you're doing something very important to have these conversations with people that coming from the heart. I mean, we're all desperate for deep connection. We spend too much time with like surface level garbage and we're all yearning to have real meaningful connection. So I think, to have these conversations with people is really important, and to hear other people's stories this is an awesome way to spread love. So I really honor what you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I know you had different mentions in your book from great leaders who inspired you personally, spiritually.
Yeah.
Anyone specifically that you would mention today?
I mean, Eckhart Tolle is to me one of the all-time greats of ever. I reread his book, A New Earth, just on repeat because I think there's so much profound wisdom in that book, and it's so grounding. And so to me, I read that book regularly, and I think his work really informs a lot of my opinions, and I can listen to it or read it 100 times and come up with something new every time. So I think his bit about the importance of meditation. I mean, that's another one of the elements of retreat is meditating. Again, having some kind of way to handle our constantly ruminating thoughts. And my view of how to handle that is through the practice of meditation. And he talks a lot about this, really just creating spaciousness within inside your internal life. So I think Eckhart Tolle to me really stands out.
Any app or advice, for
Yeah.
busy business people, as we always would say, that you would recommend or that you use, or even any
Yeah.
tip, like a habit that I can bring starting tomorrow morning?
Yes. So there's an app called Insight Timer, which I find it's a meditation app, and I think it's really easy to use. It's really manageable. So that's a great setting a timer for yourself when you're starting a meditation practice, I think is really important because you kind of sit down and suddenly you're like, I want to do this, or I need to do this. Your mind starts going all over the place. So I think setting a timer is a really great practice because then that like you don't have to be constantly thinking about when is this over. you can kind of relax into what you're doing. So it doesn't have to be Insight Timer. It can just be a timer, but there are guided meditations on Insight Timer. So if you're someone who has a very busy mind, sometimes listening to a meditation is a really helpful thing. If you want to experiment, so in my book I talk about there are two kinds of meditation. There's form meditation and there's formless meditation. So form meditation is when you're focusing on something, like you're listening to music, like binaural beats, for instance. These are those beats that have the theta brainwave vibration, so then your brain matches them. That's a really great thing to listen to too. So binaural beats is great, but this is a kind of form meditation. Or maybe you've heard of walking meditation. Again, that's form meditation. And then formless meditation is just where you're sitting down, there's no music, there's no stimulation, you're just allowing your thoughts to come in and allowing them to go out. So choose which direction you want to go, form or formless. And I would say, if you have a very busy mind, you don't have a lot of experience meditating, I would start with form meditation. I would start listening to meditations or listening to the binaural beats, something like that. So it feels a little bit more manageable. And I would also say do it in bite-sized pieces. So maybe 10 minutes is a great goal. 10 minutes every morning for 2 weeks, or 10 minutes every night before you go to bed for 2 weeks. I think that's a great starting point. From there, you can add on breath work and different things like that, or yoga or any other, or prayer, or whatever practice feels connective to you. But I think meditation is just such a foundational, it doesn't have to have any religious connotation whatsoever. It's just a really important practice. My meditation teacher talks about, he calls it making friends with ourselves. So I love, I love the lightness of that. Sometimes the Western mind comes in with such aggressive tendencies, like I've got to be the best meditator in the room or something, and I love the idea of just making friends with ourselves, just kind of softening, So that would be one tip is, using a timer, using Insight Timer, and choosing, do I want to do form meditation or formless meditation? Another tip that I have is to start to understand your state. And what I mean by that is, we have times when we have habitual behavior. So sometimes we feel lots of energy during the day. Sometimes we feel really low and tired during the day. So starting to notice where our energy dips and taking responsibility for it. There are 3 things we can do to change our state. So, sometimes for me, I'll notice after lunch, I'm kind of a bit of a bit of a dip. I feel tired. So there are a couple things you can do. You can change your focus, change what you're focusing on. So if I'm working and I've been working on the same thing for a long time and I feel that dip in my state, I need to change what I'm focusing on. So I need to try something different, work on something different, get up, move, something like that. So change your focus. You can change your physiology. So like I said, you can get up and move. You can go outside. You can run up the stairs really quick. You can jump up and down 10 times. So that's another way to quickly change your energetic state. Or you can change your language. To me, this is the most nuanced one. Noticing how we speak. If it's after lunch and you're jumping in a meeting and you're like, oh, I'm so tired. I'm just so tired. I can't believe how tired I am. Then it's just this reaffirming thing. So kind of starting to pay attention to the language that we use around everything, around how we speak about our state, around how we speak about our partnerships, about our work, all of these things. So those 3 ways, and starting to take notice in your own life of how you can manage your state. Because I think sometimes we think we're just victims to I'm just tired. And it's no, actually you can do something to shift that. So managing those 3 things would be another, and noticing in your day, where do I dip? Or when do I get really angry? Or when do I get really sad? Starting to take notice and then taking ownership of that.
That's really great tips. I will be adding. I like to share with you the one thing I'm trying to make it a habit now is, but I need to move to 10 minutes. I'm doing the triple 2. So it's 2 minutes of mindfulness, 2 minutes of planning, 2 minutes of prioritizing every morning, and I feel it changes your day. Yes. But I need to get more into the 10 minutes meditation. I'm taking a lot of tips from you today, and thank you so much for that.
Of course, I'm honored, and that's amazing that you do that practice. I mean, clearly you're a leader, so you have these things in place, which is awesome. It's so fun to talk to other people too, because then you start to get new ideas oh, I might want to try this or read this. And so I think that's a fun thing too, just sharing different ideas. What do you do for your mindfulness practice? Another thing I love is thinking and feeling gratitude. So like adding that at the end of your 10 minutes, and not just thinking like here, like writing a list, here's what I'm grateful for, but like really feeling it in your body, because the body is so amazing. As you know, it's like you don't have to go through an experience. You can actually just think about an experience, and physiologically all the same hormones are going to go off. So if you're remembering in your heart, like the moment you met your amazing wife or the moment that you had your first child, it's like I get chills just talking about it, because and then you feel energized. You're like, gosh, I do have so much to be grateful for. So it's not just making a list of things. That's a fantastic thing to do, of gratitudes, but it's like feeling it in your body. It's a physiological reaction. And so learning to feel those emotions and practicing them, right? Because the emotions that we feel over and over again they become habitualized, right? So if we're constantly pissed off, then we get really comfortable being pissed off. And then everything in our environment shows us like, well, that guy is awful and this work sucks and I don't like, so it becomes this habitualized thing. But if you practice like, oh, wow, like I feel so grateful right now to have rain. I mean, we don't usually get a lot of rain in Boulder, but it's like dumping outside and it feels like it's really green right now. And it's a silly little thing, but like to start to look for little things to feel grateful for and then feel it. It's a whole different experience.
Any final word, Brie, final word of wisdom for leaders around the world, specifically in healthcare? I'd love to hear something from you to healthcare leaders.
I hate to go back to this always, but I don't hate to go back to this at all. I think claiming fully, like planning a retreat for yourself and putting it on your calendar well in advance. So being really, really disciplined about when your retreat is, like making this part of your regular practice so that you have it on the calendar, you have something to look forward to, and that's going to come for you. I think that's critical. And so the tips are the same, whether you're in healthcare or anywhere. I mean, I think these are so valuable no matter what you're doing. But again, putting a retreat on the map, I think is incredibly critical. And then meditating, that would be the other tip. I mean, those tips I just harp on them over and over, but I think they're so important.
Thank you so much, Brie, for such an amazing discussion. And definitely in healthcare, people mainly on the front line, even more, I'm sure they need to step back, disconnect, recharge, and all the tips that you gave us today are definitely needed for us to be able to continue on serving the world from a healthcare standpoint. Thank you so much again for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you all for listening to Spread Love in Organizations podcast. Hope you enjoyed this special episode dedicated for you as leaders on how to take care of yourselves. New special episodes will be aired soon with additional tips and advice for all of us in our leadership journeys. Stay on the lookout by subscribing to Spread Love in Organizations on your favorite podcast app, following us on social media, or on SpreadLoveIO.com.